Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Hey, Dan, how you doing this morning, bro? I don't know why I'm into bro. I'm into bro. So, all right. Oh man. So I went on a walk this morning. I go for a walk every morning with my buddy Alex, and we usually walk around a park. And as we grow older, I notice how much more in depth the discussions become. like So it was like one of those I had to kind of scramble to get here. Let's turn on some music, some tunes. There we go. And I gotta turn them down, otherwise they completely overrun my voice. But I might be still working getting blood back into my system. But it always makes me kind of think about things. And we were kind of deep diving on certain aspects of society, and I find that fascinating and intriguing in a lot of ways. So I was thinking a lot about sort of, and this should not be a warning flag. I'm doing okay. But I mean, I was thinking about like life and death and how we view it and things like that, and thinking about how religions work. Um, as someone who isn't religious, I have not imbued a lot of religion into Bellatrix Rising. There's not a lot of religion in there. And I was kind of thinking about that's a failing. There will be people who have belief systems, who have concepts and designs and thoughts about dying, afterlife, things like that. And I feel like once spacefaring, it would be fascinating to see what an extrapolation of that becomes. Where do you extrapolate religion? I mean, I don't know if you guys. Nobody remembers because they were a small blip somewhere during world building. But I had the Aodist Buddhists, which were the type of Buddhists that were he wishes to visit. It's a George time because he wants scritches. But the Buddhists that I had, which were legacy Buddhists, so they actually were Buddhists. Um, but what happens to the other religions? Um, right, exactly. Contact is a great example of something that kind of ponders that through, and it's because Dr. Sagan, of course, had a lot of thoughts about these things. Dr. Sagan was an atheist, but on the same token, was interested in it just like I am. I mean, I love theology. I don't necessarily remember directly a space religion in The Expanse. If it was briefly touched on, and not necessarily. I mean, the Belters were so mad, right? The absolutely good point, solid point. The Bajorans had a religion. Hello, Sarah. Evil Space Karen. Man, it was so sad. She just the actress just passed away recently, and I was thinking, I have always wanted to go up to her and tell her how much I loved hating her character, and how much I loved her for making a character that I hated so bad. But she did such a good job, and she's such a sweet person in real life. I mean, everybody I have ever talked to who interacted with the actor was so enamored with how lovely she was as a person, how wonderful she was as a human being. And, and so I always wanted to, I'm so sad she passed before I could meet her. My circles, the way I travel, often I interact with the Star Trek actors from time to time, and I will actually be able to get in and engage them. And I try to engage them from an actor's point of view and not from a fan's point of view, because in the end, I will always be a Trekkie all the way down to the solid core of my being, and to the just to the very very bottom of what I am. So sometimes I have a real problem. But I was able to tell Nichelle how much she meant to me and how much she changed my view on racial setups, because what I learned from Nichelle Nichols in the very beginning was completely opposite of what my grandparents were trying to impose upon me culturally. And it was easier to follow Nichelle than it was to follow my grandparents on paths. And I was able to convey that to her before she passed, and that was great. But yeah. Well, it was totally amazing that I got to not only meet her, I was her handler for a weekend. So I not only got to meet her, I was there with her all day, every day for 3 days. And so that's a different experience. Handlers with the actors always have a different experience with them. Um, but anyway, the Bajorans had proof, but the Bajorans' proof was Clark's law. And so it was in violation of Clark's law, which is not to be confused with Cole's law, because Cole's law is just a bunch of mayonnaise and cabbage. And there's the dad joke. Just saying. Clark's law, which says any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic or religion. Because the reality is the wormhole aliens were not necessarily. Oh yeah, I will happily tell her everything. I've got pictures. I actually only have like 3, but still I have 3 pictures, and they are valued pictures. She wanted to give me a signed autograph thing, but I didn't want that at the time. I was very superstitious about autographs. I only had at the time a handful of autographs, and those autographs were of people who had passed. And so I was like, I don't want you to die. So, she was like, I respect that. And I was like, but can I have a picture with you? Can I get a selfie? Back in the days when selfies were not really a thing. Anyway, so back to Bajor and thinking about religion on this one. The thing about it is that they were in Clark's law. Ultimately, in the end, the Bajoran wormhole aliens were just creatures that lived, and the Bajorans idolized them. And I think that the thing that DS9 was starting to work on was the concept of holding the religion once you know your gods are real. Like they didn't go there, but I'm curious about that. Right? Q could be read as a god. Definitely. And I think that there are people who do read him as a god in the Star Trek universe. There's, at least in the extended universe, there are books about Q going forth and portraying himself as a god. And indeed, in Encounter at Farpoint, he tries to put himself forward as a god. And even in Q Who, he tries to put himself forward as a god. I feel like when Q was brought up, that was the point. Roddenberry has been hedging this thought process forever. He really wanted to hedge it in the original series and couldn't, because the writers wouldn't follow his logic. And that was the whole point of the motion picture. The whole idea was to explore that. Right. Tapestry is literally him trying to play God, like straight up. And Tapestry is the only time we get to see Picard in a blue uniform. which is still cool. I still think that's awesome. I love Picard in a blue uniform. Anyway, I'm sorry. Side note. But I mean, that's what Star Trek One was supposed to be. That was the core. That's one of the reasons why people feel like Star Trek One wanders, is because Wise, the director, couldn't understand what was going on. Roddenberry's rewriters didn't get it. The script meandered and walked off of its premise. Roddenberry tried to bring it back again in Star Trek V, and it was at that point where he was really at the end of his life, and he was really pushing hard to try to get back in. And again, every time he tries to approach this subject, there's resistance. And that was something that I think Alex and I were talking a lot about, was that. And I'm curious about that. What do you end up with when you're faced with something where so much of the data leads to a logical conclusion against, well, yeah, Shatner definitely trashed 5. Maybe. I'm willing. So the YouTuber Red Letter Media, who is an interesting guy. I'm not fond of his delivery, but sometimes he says some really interesting things that make me think. And one of the things that Red Letter Media said that was fascinating to me, and he was right, is that Star Trek V is everything the Trekkies wanted in a Star Trek movie. It was a buddy movie. It involved the core 3. There was wandering around the Enterprise, so you got to see all the different aspects of the Enterprise. It was all about friendship. It was all about sort of that unspoken bond, love between friends, going through pain, facing your pain. Like, all of the pieces of Star Trek V are exactly what Trekkies wanted in Star Trek. But they were so disjointed and so messed up that it ends up being sort of screwed up. And that's where we have the two heads of the snake. The story was about God and addressing God. What does God need with a starship? Still one of the best one-liners in all of Star Trek. What does God need with a starship? Still, like a wonderful, wonderful line. And then you had the other head, which was a buddy film, a la the Three Stooges, or a buddy cop film. And since they weren't sure where they were going on those two, they ended up messing it up. So I don't know if I necessarily blame Shatner. Every time Star Trek has tried to face head on the one question that is still an elephant in the room in Star Trek, which is, where do your beliefs go in God when you find out that there are other races with other gods? What do your beliefs say when you find out that the Andorians believe that God is blue-skinned and has antenna? How do you deal with that? How do you rectify that? Especially when you have sub-idols in your religion, like Jesus or like Muhammad, where you have sub-units, which were absolutely human beings. They were absolutely the favored person of the deity, the deity's favored child. Do they expand that belief and believe that God also had a version, that a favored child on Andor, a favored child on Vulcan, a favored child, was God just seeding the universe with favored children? And if so, how do you rectify Jesus being more important than, Snurgleblatt, the Andorian version of him? Do you rectify them as they were the same person, but different aspects? Do you rectify that though these two were in the same position, they they were peers? Do you rectify? And then if so, what happens when Jesus says don't eat fish and the Andorian one says you must eat fish? How do you rectify a collision of theologies, of philosophies? And I think that Roddenberry was trying to hedge into that zone. I'm not making a judgment. I'm just looking at it. And I think Roddenberry was hedging into that zone. And every time he tried, you ended up with a bigger problem, because either you are directly saying Jesus, at which time half of your audience is going to go, nope, that's it, I'm done. You know what I mean? Like, you can't do that. So you have to do it in Star Trek's terms, where you make it, it's not Jesus. We visited a planet, and the planet had a Jesus, but we're not going to call him Jesus. We're going to call him Bob. And Bob, you know what I mean? Like, you have to hedge it. And once you hedge it so that you can take the edge off of it, so that you can ask the question, then people don't understand the question anymore who are writing the story, and they lose the plot. That intrigues me. I also have an almost interesting atheistic religion with my Deus Thati. And that's another thing I didn't think about until I started talking it out. The Deus Thati, the character in my story that's Deus Thati is Mayrel. Her last name is Legend, because she's Clan Legend. Well, in that instance, there is a top-down question, because you're right. Deity or not, that's a bigger monster where you end up on the line of atheism versus theism. Yeah, everything gets, when you think about the story of Bellatrix Rising, and you think about where we were with this story, and I know, Dan, you haven't been with me through. I've been working on this world building for 2 years, because this was my COVID project. Last time you and I talked, I was working on a Star Trek comic. To give you a long story short, I took that Star Trek comic, pulled the characters out, pulled the concept out, and then rebuilt the world underneath it so I could sell it on my own merits. Because really, I never used Captain Kirk or anything like that as my characters, so it was pretty easy to just pull my captain and her crew off the destroyer that was in my Star Trek comic and move it over into a ship that I designed. And I built the ship, and I had fun building ships. And you know me, you and I, we are of the same type of creature. All I really wanted to do was put in control surfaces and flight surfaces, and like lights. And this is where I've got all my, you know how it goes. But then when I've gotten into it, I actually pulled the stories that I was writing as well in Tamerlane and moved them over. And a lot of them ask these questions. And so I ask a lot of these questions in the view, in the glasses of my characters. And I'm trying to figure out, though, in the history of Bellatrix Rising, now I've changed the history because I could. And what I actually did was took all of my stories that I have written over the years and kind of mashed them together, and took pieces that I liked and put pieces that I didn't like away. And back when we were all at that first apartment where you were doing the models of shampoo and stuff like that, which I wonder where that shampoo model went. Anyway, back in those days, when all of those when we were in that apartment, I had written a story called The Earth Beta, which was about the Earth being protected by a spaceship. And you probably do. Um, but it was about the Earth being protected by a spaceship, and nobody on Earth knew that the ship was protecting it. And then a war was raging in the galaxy all around the Earth, and the humans didn't know. And the crux of that story was that by galactic law, you have to have a human piloting the ship, because they believe that gives the pilot protecting the planet will have more invested interest. And so the story was about that pilot. I took that, and in the end of that story, the Earth got destroyed in the war. So I have extrapolated that aspect all the way out. And so now we're 600 years later, 500, 600 years later. No, I haven't read Mutineer's Moon. But not only that, I mean, this was, when were we at Greenwood 1? You and me? What was that? 95? 96? So unless Mutineer's Moon came out before then, I claim rights to the concept. Whatever it is, because I actually love Weber, and I'll go read Mutineer's Moon now that I have settled my universe. But this isn't about that world. Yeah, 94 to 99. That was 1 and 2 and 3. Yeah. Because we moved to Greenwood, and 4 even, because Greenwood 5 was 2001. 2000 was 2000, just after the turn of the millennium. Because we were at Greenwood 4 on the night of Y2K, because we were all playing StarCraft. Oh, maybe. I haven't read it yet. Anyway, because Weber, James got me into Weber on Basilisk Station and Y2K. You remember Y2K? We were all playing stupid StarCraft. That's ridiculous. And we were tasking our PCs because we really wanted to see them explode and die on Y2K, and nothing happened. But I remember all of us loading up our PCs as much as possible when midnight rolled around, just to see what would occur. We had our network pushed as far as it would go. We had everything. That was a beautiful night. That has to be one of my more entertainingly favorite geeky nights that we have ever had as a crew, as a group. Yeah, I think you were there. I'm pretty sure you were there. Everybody was there. It was a Greenwood night. I know Mike Milan and George were there. You might not have been there, now that I think about it, because you were with us at G3. But your time at G4 was sporadic. Like, my memories of you at G4 are, good morning, Bob. Yeah, because you had already left. You're right. I don't think you were there for Y2K. You may not have been. I know that we had at least a good portion of the ones who were. Yeah, no, you were on a boat. You're right. You were on a boat. You had boated out. Bob, I'm talking to my buddy Dan, who I have literally known since. I mean, he's one of the early folks that went to the Die Club. So the Die groups back in the day. Back in the day. So we weren't reminiscing necessarily. We rabbit holed. Anyway, you were on a boat. Dan, you were on a boat. Because, yeah, you're right. I don't think you were at Y2K. But we did have a huge Greenwood Y2K party. And we had loaded up every machine. and we were all playing as hard as we were putting as much pressure on the network as possible. We were putting as much um, right. There you go. You were in Pasadena. Yeah, Bob, you it was a 7 miles in dress shoes. You're like, I will never forget that. Um, it's like the Baton Death March, except in dress shoes. Um, so yeah, and that was the year of the Rose Enterprise D. Huh. Would have loved to have seen that. So, Bob, we are discussing this morning religion. Not necessarily because we need it for the comic at this point, but because I went on a walk with my buddy, and he and I were discussing it while on walk, and I just kind of started pondering it. What is the state of religion in Bellatrix Rising? As a non-believer, going down the wrong Colorado Boulevard, it's a thing. As a non-believer, for me, I've been kind of operating from the point of view that there are no real religions, not intentionally, just because it never really occurred to me. And then my friend and I were discussing it, and there was a lot of, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about it that way. You know what I mean? Like, there was a lot of kind of pondering it and repondering it and rethinking it. So now I'm kind of wondering about our religion and religions in general. And so Dan and I have been sort of going on a tangent about it this morning, because I've got what we were working on last night up on my monitor. I haven't gotten to actually working on it yet. But I've been thinking about this, and I think, Dan, where I was headed for was, I have this group of people in this universe. One of my main characters is of this group. The group branched from the humans. Tangents in conversation, you got it. At least they're not converging tangents, because we all know how much I hate converging tangents and how much I war against converging tangents. That's anyway. So thinking this through, the group of people that we've got that I use are called the Deistati. They were a group of people who, I'm going to open up a picture here. A group of people who, in the original version of this, well, not in the original version, in all versions of it, they left the core of humanity and went a different direction early on. So they've had like 400 years of development that was different than ours, than our main characters. And so the Deus do a different sort of thing. I'm trying to find a good picture of, before I run rapidly out of here, and I don't know why I don't have a good picture of Mayrel, and I really don't. Maybe that's something I should do today. We'll do this. So Mayrel is this character here. She's Deus, right? And these people are story-based. Everything, their belief system is story-based. Her last name is Legend. All of the families in the Deus culture are named after story types. There's actually clan story, which that's the name of the people. You have Bob's story and Tim's story and Lucy's story, and that's what they're called because they're clan story. She's of Clan Legend, which is a different clan, but it's one of the 10 powerful clans of the Dea Stati. And I realized that thinking about the way that they are, in a way, that's a religion. They have a religion. It's just that it's not classic. It's not a classic religion. Their religion is the story. Like your everlasting spirit in their world is your story. So much so that that's what this tattoo on her forehead is. That's her story. And the more she goes through life, the more of these little symbols she will get tattooed to her skull. And they run up and down her skull. And ultimately, you will meet other Dea Stati, which have many more of these. They've got a longer story or a more convoluted story or a more variegated story. And every time they have a story point, they put another symbol on their tattoo to indicate their story, so that you can literally ask everybody about their story. What's the story? What does this mean? And each symbol means something. An inverted triangle means a traumatic event. The round circular dots mean an event that is a normal life event, like growing up, giving birth, having graduating from college, those kind of things, just your normal life events. Up arrows indicate like a promotion in life or moving forward in life. So they've got their story written literally on their face so that you can read their life story or ask about it. And all of it means something. And so to some degree, I was realizing that in a way that's a religion, because hearing the characters talk in my head, I hear what, when you ask that character in my head what she says to this. She says the problem with afterlife, in my thought process for what the Dea Stati think, the problem with afterlife is that it overestimates the value of a person and underestimates the value of their story. So, what happens after you're dead is irrelevant to them because the story ends, as all stories do. And so, but the value of you as a person is not in what you do after you die, because there's no way you would know. That has no effect on the universe. The value of you as a person is the story of what you did during your life. And that's actually what prompted me to think that they had this culture, was that, what if you had a culture that was built around the concept, the design of the value of your life is literally what you do while you're alive, and make the best of it, be the best that you could. So that's what the Dea Stati think. That's their belief system. That's their structure. She's going to mentor the girl that we were just talking about yesterday. The girl's my MacGuffin in this story. She's the furtherer of the big story. She's the machine. She's the Chekhov's gun. She's the mechanic that propels my characters through the story. That character, Alex, who oddly was not named after my friend Alex. It's weird. Anyway. So yeah, I mean, that's what, talking to said friend Alex today, I kind of realized that we've got a religion going in here. She's pulling a religion to some degree. That's a religion. The Dea Stati are religious people. They're just not religious in the same standard way. I know why I retired this picture. Because since this picture, rank indicators became orange, and Bennett in the background there now wears light blue because she's in the command line. She's no longer She's now an officer of the line. So now she's wearing light blue like the captain. So the colors are wrong on this picture, which is kind of a bummer because it's not a bad picture. But yeah. So anyway, that's where I went with this thought process, was talking a little bit about my character's religion in context. Now the other question, of course, is: are there derivatives? And this is what Dan and I were talking about. Are there derivatives of, say, Christianity? And that's an interesting question. I have established that there are derivatives of Buddhists in the story. I actually do have legitimate Buddhists. They're called Aodists because they're descendants of Zen Buddhists. But their belief system is Zen, so it's easy for them to adapt and move on and not have to worry per se about, because it's an adaptable religion. Zen's pretty adaptable. I think about Muslim, Islam, and Christianity are not as adaptable. They don't move as easily because they have icons, and the icons are easily challenged. So the question really is, how did those religions adapt in the future? Because they would be there. There would still be derivatives of, descendants of Christians, and there would be descendants of Muslims. Yeah, and that's the question I'm kind of wondering about. Once you're faced with the galaxy is stupid huge, and moreover, we're just one of billions of galaxies. That's even more of a problem. Once you're faced with that, once you're faced with every alien race has their own version of Jesus or Muhammad, how do you deal with that? How do you rectify that in your head? And we're right back to contact. I mean, because this is something that definitely was something that Dr. Sagan thought about a lot in his thinking, in his work. Oh, by the way, Bob, that's Tamarbeshi right here. This is the Tamarbeshi. Here, let me highlight it. This right here. That's the language that what I'm talking about whenever I say it's just in a incomprehensible language. I'm actually terrified about writing in Tamarbeshi. Because right now I write in Tamarbeshi and I pretty much just, go blap on the keyboard. Right? And what do you do if you have a deist who confronts a race that doesn't have a god? Does that unconfirm it? And then you want to talk about interesting story arcs. What do you do when that race develops theists? Right? I mean, like, let's just say the Shakrana they've never had a deity, right? They don't have a deity. They've never asked the question, what happens after they die? They've never asked the question, who invented the universe? Yeah, Buddhism is much more, especially Zen, the Zen branch of Buddhism which, by the way, anybody who has wandered through the history of Japan will find that, boy, there is some funny. Whew, Buddhism gets ugly at some point in time. So Buddhism is not without blood on its hands. There's a lot of blood in both China and Japan's history. They just happen to be peaceful now. Like Shepherd Book. Yeah. Um, but this isn't, this is the stuff that, this is rich. This is very rich, fertile soil, which we can go into in Bellatrix. We can start asking these questions and we can start pulling it through and seeing how the characters interact with it and how they interface with it. I think I'm going to make it so that the Chakrana, because I love this concept, I'm going to make it so the Chakrana never had a deity. It just wasn't something they ever considered. It just wasn't a system that they decided to do anything about. They were okay with where they were. The Chakrana are probably the most alien of my aliens. They live in hard vacuum. They grow in hard vacuum. They are part of they're effectively rocks, just rough rocks. So I'm trying to pull up a Chakrana. I don't think I have any Chakrana in here. I can see the Chakrana here, but I don't see. That's the 3D model that I use for him. But main characters, not here. No. Maybe here. Do I have? Why don't I have a folder for him? Weird. Only humans. I'm such a racist. Okay. Under critters? No, it's a Volmar. The Jacine in there. Yeah, I mean, things change. Bill Shatner said that his view of the universe changed by going up into space. That changed his view, his belief system. And I think that all of us have belief systems that we do from one way or another. Like we favor certain belief systems more than other belief systems. I favor the belief system that George wants scritches. George favors that belief system too, right? You favor that. Goofy cat. But I think we favor, and some of us more than others. My wife speaking of green, my wife is like straight down the line a Californian hippie, literally born in San Francisco, literally is one of those would recycle everything if she could get away with it. I agree with environmentalism. I try to be environmental whenever possible, but I don't feel guilty if I have to throw away a bottle in a trash can. You know what I mean? Whereas she definitely feels guilty about that. Like that, she will go 2 miles out of her way to find a recycling bin to throw her bottle away. Whereas I'm like, and levels. There are levels of it. Sure, I want to protect the planet. I will do my best. But I'm not going to panic if I can't, What is it with you? Yeah. And that's cool. And Bob's argument, and he's not wrong, is that it's sort of a form of religion. It is. It's a belief system. We don't know what tomorrow will bring. We're not 100% sure that recycling all of the bottles will indeed save the planet. We have pretty solid evidence that it's a good thing to do. And I'm pretty willing to follow that. We have some pretty solid evidence that we're damaging the planet by not doing it. I'm okay with that too. And therefore, I will do as best as okay. I have to go. I will be right back. My child has closed the door to the under sink um, thing in his bathroom, and George can't open it. So George is reaching in and it's going wham, and he's pulling it out and it's going wham. And that's that banging noise you're hearing. He can't get under the sink. So I'm going to go open the door so he'll get under the sink. That's all he wants is to be under the sink. It's your tail. Here's what I'm going to do. This one is here. You can stay in here all you want. You can go back under there, but stop banging on doors, you goofy cat. So, anyway, it is totally a thing. I get it. It's all good. Oh, yeah, you probably can't hear it. It's probably too far away. And I follow. But yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of things. Fair enough. I am actually kind of, I don't know. I think it may be too late for me to try to get off this rock ever. I may never. This story may be all I'm ever going to get as far as getting off the rock. You know what I mean? Get into space via here. We need to be a lot more careful with our materials. And that's okay. Back to what I was talking about, though, on this. We talk about things. Once people start to kind of see where we are in the universe, and just how big that becomes, I think that changes people's view too, right? Like, I tried to do it with the tech manual and it was hard. But I mean, like, you look here, and this is our galaxy, right? And this little square right here becomes this square right here, right? And then all of this right here, this green dotted line becomes this right here, right? And even here, from Earth to Vega, from Sol to Vega, that's just this section right here. These two, in a normal conventional spacecraft, that would still take us 25 years at light speed. And that's presuming you're at light speed, the fastest that you could possibly go in the universe, the galactic speed limit. If we didn't go light speed, but went just 90% the speed of light, it would take us a half a century to get there. Not to us, of course, but to everybody else. And you start thinking about, I mean, even when we start talking about just the size of things, right? I mean, Bellatrix is a long ways away. And here's, by the way, what we were talking about last night, the wall. This is H1 clouds. This is an H1 cloud unit here. And so merely keep is where the other destroyers are being kept, because moment is argumentative, and so they don't want a defensive picket there. And so, but of course, moment is just inside the wall. And so it becomes one of those, it's hard for Bellatrix to hold moment because it's inside the wall. You know, but Hades and the people of the Commonwealth are pushing across this defense line and have been trying to push into this zone because they can surround Bellatrix. And if they can surround Bellatrix, they can take over Bellatrix ultimately. That's the battle plan. So, but this is a political map here. But even when we move then into, the local, this is 1 parsec. 1 square here is 1 parsec. That's 3 light years, right? You start looking at that and you're like, this is a long ass direction. It takes 3 years just to go from Bellatrix to QuACk in light speed. Which is why all science fiction needs to have the concession of a faster than light space travel function. Because there's no way. But you talk about then religion, right? That's exactly the point. You talk about religion. Why then, knowing the size of everything, going over here and knowing, just backing all the way back out to the point where on here we are but a dot, less than the pixel, less than this pixel right here, right? Well, actually, it's right here. We live, everything we know is in this 1 pixel on this map. And it's not just that everything we know is in that 1 pixel. Even this entire story takes place in 5 pixels of this map. And my entire story spans all over the place. And that's this 1 spot right there on this massive galaxy, right? That is us. My maps, by the way, much to Brent's chagrin, my maps are accurate to about 3 light years when they're close. It gets a little fuzzy when you get out here to like this area and up into the park, up into this zone up here. It gets a little fuzzy. This is pretty accurate in this zone because we've hit that with a telescope over there. But like especially back here, it's really hard to see through the center of the galaxy. But it is pretty accurate. We're a double bar galaxy now. We know that. We know where the gravity wells are on this. So that's a thing. When you see here, it says the Goth speed zone, the Korolev speed zone, stuff like that. Areas without gas in it there, we can travel on in space at a very high speed. With the gas creates the conceit. The science in Bellatrix Rising says that in space, gravity anomalies increase in size. So if you are near a planet and the planet has a gravity well this big and you are going a little over the speed of light, the gravity well becomes this big. The faster you go, the more that gravity well expands until you get to a point where there's literally no way you can weave your way through the arm of the Milky Way without running into a gravity well, which will destroy your ship. So it gets to a point where even a hydrogen atom's gravity well becomes a significantly large enough object to avoid. Well, so you ready for this one? How do we know what it looks like? How do we know it's a double bar? There are 2 reasons we know it's a double bar. One, moving through the center here, there is a group of stars right at the dead center called Sagittarius A. Sagittarius A prime is what they really call it. Sagittarius A prime is not a star, it's a black hole. It's a big black hole. It's a big enough black hole that we can see it punches a hole in the night sky. We don't actually see Sagittarius A prime. What we see are the 12 stars that are orbiting Sagittarius A prime. Some of them are orbiting Sagittarius A prime at pretty close to a significant percentage of the speed of light. Enough that within a year, you can see Sagittarius A prime, and within a year, you can see a full orbit of one of those stars inside a year. And it's moving light years around it. So it's moving either significantly, well, it's probably over a course of many years, but still enough that we have been observing that one area with both Hubble and with ground-based telescopes enough to watch that star orbit, and it's moving. It's moving. And then some of the other stars orbit too. And we can watch their orbits and get an idea of how much mass Sagittarius A prime has. How do we know that it's a double bar? So the biggest thing that we've got right now, the biggest tool that we use to find out where stars are, is a space probe right now called Gaia, which was launched by the ESA. In the late 90s, they had one probe that went up there, and they've replaced it recently with another probe that does the same job. The first one was called Hipparcos, and now we've got Gaia up. And Gaia is moving in what we call a solar orbit or a heliocentric orbit. So it's not orbiting around the Earth, it's orbiting around the sun. So it's another planet. It's in our orbit, so it's not quite wide enough to be far out. And ideally, we'd place it in a heliocentric orbit like with Saturn. But right now, Gaia orbits the sun. And when it does, it tracks in on a star and then moves to here, takes a picture of the star, and then waits the year until it's on the other side of the solar system and takes a different picture of that section of space. Then we take what we call parallax, right? The star was here on one side and the star was here on another relative to this star. These stars are moving, but this star is moving faster than this star. If this star is moving faster, it's closer, just basic trigonometry. And so what we've been doing is we take measurement markings. It's just like how you would do it on the road outside. You'll take, let's get to here. You'll take I'll get a big pen for this. You'll take a measurement marking of here, and a measurement marking of here, and a measurement marking of here, and a measurement, you know what I mean? Like they'll take these key marking plots, and they'll see which stars are in between all of these things and us. And because we'll see these as one line of stars, right? We'll see them all as a line. If you look at, like, say, as an example, Orion's 3 belt stars are pretty close together, but Bellatrix and Betelgeuse are in a completely different place, and that's the shoulder stars. Bellatrix is much closer to Earth, and Betelgeuse is much farther away. Looking at that from the top down here, that's exactly how you'll see it right here, right? From Earth, taking the shot through this map, you can see that we would see Bellatrix as here, right? But Betelgeuse is the other shoulder, and it's there, right? So we see it in 2 different locations. How we place how far those are is based solely on how well, wow, that's a 747. How well we target those 2 stars, but we can see it when Gaia goes back and forth. Yeah, you'll notice that Betelgeuse is not doing so good on this map. So it's Betelgeuse is what they call it's a class, I think it's called a class 3 supernova now, or moving towards supernova. It's falling apart. The star is falling apart. It's dying. It's already burned off most of its core hydrogen, and now is just burning off what's left in the star. As it does that, it burns much brighter. While it does that, and it increases in size. And as Bob is mentioning, Betelgeuse probably blew up a long time ago and has become a nebula. I'm going to place it in the story of Bellatrix Rising. Betelgeuse blew up about 500 years ago or so. So there's a ring nebula around Betelgeuse right now. It's about 500 light years across. Um, it doesn't surprise me at all. But because of the distance of these stars, we can start telling some of the structure of the galaxy. We can identify the structure of the galaxy. There's a lot of things that we can tell about the structure of the galaxy. The other thing is knowing what kinds of stars there are. We now know with pretty good accuracy about how a star lives and dies. We know we've watched enough stars now live and die that we know what their life cycle is. And so, in other words, we look through the night sky, and if we see a whole bunch of old men, but we know that they are far, far away, then they're probably a different class of star than if we're looking far, far away and see a whole bunch of babies, right? That tells us a different structure setup, because stars are born and die in nebulas. They blow up, and then what forms out of that is a different population of star, and it gives off a different spectrum. So population 3 stars are the first stars that lived in our galaxy, and they are very pure. They don't burn much of anything except for hydrogen. That's pretty much all they burn. And their end result is helium. So they give off helium whenever they're done burning down. Those guys then explode and become a nebula. And inside that nebula is a bunch of junk that ends up in there. The junk is all noble gases. So when the next star forms, it burns dirtier. And those are population 2 stars. And we can see them through a spectrograph burning a different set of chemicals. Those then burn themselves out over a certain amount of time. And this is all dependent on their mass and size. And when they do, they die and they become a nebula, which is even dirtier. Then the population 1 stars, which is what we are, burns. Those usually have planets because there's so much junk. It's now taken the hydrogen and helium and burned them down into noble gases. All those noble gases then burn down into heavier elements like iron and nickel and things like that. Those become effectively pearls, like they're pearls inside the clam of a star system. That's the dirt. It's the junk. The junk then, because of gravity, forms spheres. That's a population 1 star. We're a population 1 star. Right, exactly. And so that's how the universe works. All of these things are shaking down into these different classes of stars. And because of the different classes of stars, when you look at it through a spectrograph, you can see what elements are burning in the star. So we can see areas of the galaxy that are different ages and different eras. And star growth happens faster. Star growth will happen faster in the arm, and then it goes slower outside of the arm. So the denser packed stars evolve faster. So you'll get population 1, 2, 3 really quick. Whereas out here in the less dense area around the arms, it's slower. They don't generate as much nebulas. It takes a long time for a nebula to spread out and then recongeal into a new star. So in the spaces between arms, you end up with a slower progression. Those stars will still be population 3 stars. They'll still be the early generation of stars in between the arms. Inside the arms, it's evolving fast. Things are moving quickly. And so we can tell by looking at a star what position it is in the arm and where the arm is. And by using parallax, we can tell where it's moving. That gives us a ground view picture of how our galaxy looks. And we've been pasting it together slowly over the last hundred years or so, pasting this together and watching an image of this. And we have to take relativity into effect, right? The further away it is, the more likely we are to see a population 3 star, simply because it's millions of years ago, right? And so, because we're not looking at the light of a current star, we're looking at the light of a star that left that star 50 million years ago. So that's how we tell what the structure of our galaxy is. We'll see denser populations moving in a degree, whereas behind it we can see the lighter populations that are moving slower. And we know that these denser populations then are evolving faster. So essentially what'll happen is you'll look back in time, and we expect, when we look at this section of space, we know how far these stars are, right? And what we expect out of these stars is for them to be babies. And instead we're seeing old men. If we see old men, that means that probably we're in an interspatial gap between arms. Now we know these stars live between the arms of the galaxy. And that's how you tell. Improvements in technique and resolution has helped, certainly. Having tools in orbit like Gaia helps us immensely, so much. But that's how we know where places are. Here's a great example. Looking at this map, when Gaia goes back and forth, the way that the stars are in Orion, the 2 stars of Orion, for Gaia's very sensitive instruments, it's watching Bellatrix move slower than Betelgeuse as it goes around the solar system. So it knows that Bellatrix is closer, because that's what you would see if they were positioned like this. In this instance, I'm literally doing this. My hands are going the same direction. I'm not changing the way my hands are relative to each other. I'm just changing. They're going left and right. And you can already see that this one's moving faster. Yes, exactly. There's 2 types of astronomy kind of going on there. And that's the way it goes. So that's how you can tell. And when we mapped the center of our galaxy, what we found was a whole bunch of old men in a long line in there, kind of at an angle like this, with that supermassive black hole right here. And then part of it, of course, is that we looked at another galaxy farther away that happens to be turned flat to us, and we looked at its structure and realized that there are these barred black hole, or these barred galaxies, where they've got a bar in the center that's spinning, instead of just everything going into a coil, like everything being flushed down in a toilet. Instead, you have a bar. And part of it is just because the bar has everything to do with what that spin is. There are structures all through the universe that are the same structure, repeated in larger elements. For example, when people talk about the way that the solar system is built, right? The way that our solar system is constructed, we have a star in the center, and our planets obviously moving out like this. I guess I should put them, all around like that. And they go around like so. And things we're discovering is that there's a structure that's very similar to the bar of the galaxy. Originally, we knew that we had a solar bow shock, something that looks like this. And that's where there is a certain amount of motion of items and things that are flowing through the arm of the galaxy, and we're in that pool. And that pool is being pushed around the bow shock of our system, like this. And we can see it. Voyager just crossed this bow shock. Voyager 1 did. And Voyager 2 also did. They went two different directions. But they crossed this bow shock, and this is what we call interstellar space. And this is stellar space, so inside our system. What they're discovering now is that it's barred the same way as the galaxy. It's not straight like this. It's more like a croissant in a shape, like this. And that's more what it looks like. It's got a coil system going out like this, which gives the bow shock a specific height to it that's wider and higher than it actually has distance going this way. And it's going in the poles of the star. So our star's poles cause this bow shock to distort upward like this and downward. This means that now when you look at the system of our sun, if you look at the gravity gradients on it, our star is, that's too small. We need bigger than that. Our star is like this, and we've got a pole like this and a rotation, right? And the gravity gradients are moving more up and over in lines like this, which then push that bow shock up and over as well. But because of that, when you look at our galaxy, we end up with the same thing. We end up with a black hole, which is spinning, and it ends up with that same structure that ends up with a bar. So probably, despite the fact that the stars around that black hole are doing this kind of stuff, probably, most likely, you will find the pole of that black hole aligns with the bars of the galaxy. And the things that are being pulled in are being pulled in across this croissant-shaped bar that is, which is why they found out that it's croissant-shaped. Voyager 2 is along our ecliptic plane. Voyager 1 moved on out across the ecliptic. And so you get a very different design. So odds are good. And I'm not going to put money on it, but if I ever do actually go back to college and go get my PhD in astrophysics, and someday I hope I can talk to Dr. McDonnell about this, because Dr. McDonnell is the science consultant for Star Trek, and I meet her from time to time at conventions. And I always hope, this is one of those things, I just wish I could sit down with her for lunch at some point in time and say, okay, check me on this, because her entire doctoral thesis was on gravity gradients. And she loves gravity stuff, as is obvious by the fact that she's the science consultant on Star Trek, and almost everything's now gravity-based in Star Trek, because she's obviously got a serious influence on the writers. But I'm curious as to whether my theory on this holds water, as to whether the black hole in the center that causes the bar is because of a gravity gradient going that way. So I will quantify everything I just said is a theory. But it's a guy theory. And sometimes guy theories pan out. I hope I didn't wander way out into Never Never Land with you there, Dan. Sorry about that. Everything fascinates me. Airplanes fascinate me. Space fascinates me. Everything fascinates me. Sometimes I wonder whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. So anyway, that's kind of the theory. And because of the nature of this in Bellatrix Rising, they have maps that give you an idea of where everything is. And I was telling you about this yesterday, where I have effectively the same thing you were talking about, where we have gradient maps that go to that are physical. Oh yay! Free vert girls. You know what? Vert girls, we're going to block you. And then add to block list on Restream, which is gonna mess that up, but that's okay. It'll get there. I actually have the ability to control those guys from my Restream control unit, so I blocked them. Anyway, so this is what I was talking about, Dan, when I was saying I had built something very similar to your airport sheet that you were talking about. Exactly. I think so too. I think there's a ton of energy, especially if you're talking about, if you think of space as a fabric and not as something burned and used. For example, when the primary concept of space prior to Einstein was that space was empty and devoid, there was nothing in it. Einstein started talking about the idea that things are connected through a fabric that exists sort of throughout space. So when you think of black holes, people keep thinking of black holes as as a hole, which it really isn't. It's a greedy star that keeps eating everything and continues to eat and continues to eat and gets bigger and bigger. So a black hole at the center of the galaxy is pretty much the sewer of everything in that galaxy. Everything's falling toward it. And it's ultimately, in the end, you just have a really large star in the center that is the size of the mass of the galaxy. Instead of thinking of it as, people have this concept that black holes are an entry point, and somewhere there needs to be an outry point. And there really just isn't. All of the objects that fall into a black hole land on the black hole's surface and become more, it's like the largest ball of twine. It's like thinking of it as like the world's largest ball of twine. It's not like you enter the ball of twine and come out somewhere else in a yarn store. The largest ball of twine just gains more twine. So do black holes. What they're doing to space is twisting it and bending it because it's so heavy. It's a bowling ball on a sheet, right? You stretch a sheet taut and you drop the bowling ball on it, and it goes all the way through to the floor and pulls the entire sheet down into it. If you take that bowling ball and spin it when you drop it onto the sheet, it's going to take the sheet and spin the sheet around and make a tangled mess of the sheet as it falls to the floor. And that's what a black hole is doing. So if you think about a spinning black hole, it's twisting space like a sheet would be twisted. So you're going to end up with twisted space. Gravity is an expression of space, of space-time. It's expressing the lines, if you will, of the sheet. In a way. I'm oversimplifying. Yes. But galactically speaking, from the point of view of the black hole, it's irrelevant. I made a joke. Because the black hole has an eternity to suck up everything. So relative to the black hole really doesn't care. It takes a long time for the dirt to finally settle on the surface, yes. But from the point of view of the black hole, especially since the black hole is already superluminal, or at least luminal at some point, it's happening instantly. So to the black hole's point of view, it's a constant rain of matter always falling on the surface from its point of view, because it's already luminal, if that makes any sense. It's just that nothing is ever escaping. Even the light on the surface of the explosions, the things that are being destroyed on the surface of this black hole, the explosive light that's coming out of it is being pulled back into it to become even more explosive light. You know what I mean? So it's sort of that, when you drop a marble into the thing with all the marbles and the mouse traps, that's what happens. The light comes in and it sets off the mouse traps, but all the marbles come back down and set off more mouse traps. So it's just this constant ongoing, and the rain and the explosions get shorter and shorter. Yeah, to a black hole, time is meaningless. It doesn't really matter to it. If you were to be perceiving what the black hole could perceive, you would just see a constant rain of matter coming down all the time and being pulled in and raining onto the surface, at which time it's crushed utterly until it is as flat as possible. And then even then, the atomic structure gets crushed and then explodes, which then the light from it then gets crushed and pulled back down. And it just becomes epically massive. If we ever find a grand unification theory, it's going to be there at the surface of the singularity of a black hole. Because the black hole is the ultimate trash compactor. It's pressing everything together till it's infinitely small. Even the center, the black hole at the center of our galaxy, they're saying, is probably the size of the Earth. Maybe a little smaller, maybe Mars. So that is what's pulling our entire galaxy around. But the truth of the matter is, our galaxy is nothing but empty space. That's another mind-boggling thing. All it's doing is taking all of the matter in the universe and crushing it into a ball in the center of the galaxy. In doing so, it's taking out all the empty space. There's a lot of empty space out there. We are a lot of empty space. The distance between our atoms inside us is big enough to drive a truck through. Not really, but you get an idea, right? That's part of it. So, it's a long thing. Mm-hmm. Yes. And they move at speeds. Everything is mostly empty space. So all a black hole is doing is just deleting the empty space and compressing what's left together. But since my body, even if it's mostly empty space, still has a mass value, that mass value, you can compress me down into a space that's infinitely small, but I'll still have 200 and something pounds worth of mass. And that's what a black hole is. You take the Earth and you can compress the Earth into a square this big, but it will still weigh as much as the Earth. And so once you add that square to the black hole, the mass of this planet is still there. The weight, the impact into space-time is still there. It still has all the lines from the gravity well. So, Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. We need a lot more information to get a better idea of the grand unification theory. I absolutely agree. This has become a fascinating discussion this morning, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Um, all of this really interests me in a great way. I'm very intrigued by all of this. Um, you can kind of see what I was talking about with the the torus that goes around, the primary torus that goes around the star looks like this, but the gravity wave of it pulls back and pushes back and around, and that torus is bent backwards, the horns, if you will. Ooh, horns, I like that. It's got horns. All stars have horns. So, and that's the nature of the beast. So, yep, I'm going to stand up because I've been sitting for a long time. I hope that makes some sense to people. I hope I can express that in the story. So, I probably need to come up with more things up here in these squares, looking at this graphically. So, there we go, guys. That's the setup for my universe. It's as accurate as I could make it. Maybe. I mean, we presume a lot will be the same physics-wise. We have to. We have to assume that physics stays the same. The Planck constant is the Planck constant. That salinity is salinity. Pi will always be pi. Things like that. We spend a lot of time kind of pondering those things and thinking them through. We hope that that becomes the same universally. Like we go to another alien race and they're like, oh, hey, I'm an alien. And what's pi? Well, pi is 3.14. And we hope that they don't say, oh, pi is 2.13. And here, look, I'll show you. And they've got a different mathematical function for it. I think really if they had a different mathematical function, we'd find they just don't count by fives or something like that. You know what I mean? Like the concept would be that they operate in a different sphere. So, but we'd still find that if you translate their two to our mathematical system, their 2 equals our 3. You know what I mean? So then it'd all fit. You know what? He's not necessarily wrong. I actually think that Douglas Adams tripped over a ton of stuff that he didn't know he was onto something, but he actually was onto something. Like he was he had some concepts that I think his drunken stupor in a field in wherever it was, Sussex, wherever the heck he ended up to do that, to start that whole thing. I believe that he was oddly on target for a lot of things, you know? And there was a lot of stuff that's like, like the number 42 keeps popping up in science a lot. Now, that could just be confirmation bias, right? We're all aligned towards hitchhikers, so naturally if you see a 42, you're like, ha ha. Could be confirmation bias. But it is interesting. It's intriguing how often he was correct. I would be willing to believe that The universe is a bubble, and all of this stuff that's inside it is imperfections in the bubble as the bubble expands in a foam. So if you think of a foam with a bunch of bubbles forming, each one of those is a universe inside it. And inside that universe bubble are these imperfections that start when the bubble starts to expand. And those imperfections spread out. And as they do, they congeal and form into ultimately just bits of the bubble, right? Whatever was inside that bubble. And those are the ultimate black holes. The black holes become the final matter inside that bubble. So the bubble expands until you have a bunch of little dots inside there, just specks inside this bubble. And those are all black holes where at one point in time they were dust, and the dust finally congealed up into a speck. And you know what I mean? Like, because everything seems to follow the same patterns. There's a pattern and it repeats and it repeats. The galaxy is swirling in the same way that, I mean, it's got a Coriolis effect. It's the same way as water swirls going down a drain. It's the same effect that we see planets orbiting the stars are the same effect as electrons orbiting neutrons. They have the same pattern. They match a pattern. So I'd be willing to bet that that's my thought, is that we're a bubble in a foam of some sort. And Bellatrix, I put that into the story. That is in this. So that's later down the line, though. It's not something we deal with issue 1 or issue 2. That's issue 50 or issue 51. And I don't even mean I should stop doing that, because the way Bellatrix is set up is there's a number, Mandelbrot set. Patterns within patterns. Fractals. Fractals match the same sort of structure. Data moves through machines in a logical pattern that you can see repeated in other areas. All things seem to have like the same sets of patterns. Clouds. Our clouds move across the planet in much the same way that nebula move in space. And the more we look at matter and how matter is moving in the galaxy, the more we realize that all of the stars are moving very much like you would expect the motion of, say, flowers in a river, right? If you were to put little flower petals in a river, it has the same motion and the same structure. Little things like we're talking right here, this bubble was probably opened up by the Pleiades group, this group of stars that belongs to the Pleiades cluster. It's moving in a different direction. It's going away from us. Whereas the rest of the galaxy, in this instance, is moving this way. This is moving this way. It's not really. It's moving this way, and we're moving this way. And that's what's really happening, is that it's moving away from us. But that clearly means that it did not start out moving in the stream in the same direction as everything else. In fact, indeed, this Pleiades cluster has wandered through time, has wandered through this entire area and done all kinds of interesting destruction to our zone. But because it's a big clump, it moves in a different way than all the other individual little things. So if you were to put a clump of flowers, flower petals, a clump of flower petals will move in a different way through the river than a bunch of individual flower petals. It's yet another way we can tell the structure of our galaxy is extrapolating up. But we got that same thing, those patterns, and they repeat. That pattern repeats. Everything is clearly following one set of laws that repeat through the whole thing. You want to call them laws of nature. But even Dr. Sagan was talking about that. Dr. Sagan was talking about how we all work with laws of nature. Things branch to a smaller unit. Trees match the veins of our body, which is the way that rivers flow across the nation, or on planets. There's a repeating pattern there. You know what I mean? We don't usually see things that run back on themselves. We don't see rivers turning around and going the other direction. When we pour water across a surface, you see it move in the same manner as lightning strikes, right? If you have a stream of water and you're running it down, this is all stuff that I have observed because like the movie industry uses these things interchangeably to represent the same thing, realizing that they've already sort of realized that these things have the same stuff. But you can make a lightning strike in much the same way by taking a stream of water and fluorescing it, and it makes a very convincing lightning strike. You know what I mean? Because a stream of water across, say, a plate of glass will move in that jagged sort of pattern. So you get sort of that same chaotic pattern as what's his name's Goldblum's character in Jurassic Park, who was talking about chaos theory. That's the core of chaos theory, is that all of these patterns are the same. So something to think about. I don't know, I keep thinking about that a lot. I think about a lot of things a lot. But yeah, Mandelbrot sets. At one point in time, we had 7 viewers on this show. Now we're down to 3. I'm just saying. How do we lose viewers for Guy? Have Guy go on a 2-hour dissertation about gravity. Anyway, the TLDR on this one is I would be willing to bet that we will find that gravity operates in much the same operational way as water or air. And air and water are fluid systems. They're the same thing, same critter. Right. Path of least resistance is definitely a layman's acceptance of the chaos theory. But yeah, I think we'll find that gravity moves in the exact same way as all other fluid systems, which is what, like we were talking last night, Bob, you and I were, about the concession that my ships can detect. Essentially what they're detecting is ripples in the water, ripples in the gravity. They can detect those ripples. It's just that my conceit is that those ripples are not traveling at light speed. They're instant. So it's more like a spider web. Pull one side and all the web moves. Everything shifts. So that's a thing, that conceit, that they can perceive the ripples in the gravity. And that gives it the ability, that gives my ships the ability to be able to understand and see what's going on. So anyway, that's sort of what's going on in the story. I am totally off script because Brent is right now traveling for his company. So I'm unsupervised. So there. And when Brent watches this later on, which he likely will, he will sit there and shake his head the entire time and say, see, star maps got up here. He started with the star maps. This is how we know things are going south, is because Guy has already pulled out the star maps. And so that's the way it goes. Everything goes south the moment the star maps come up. So, anyway, I'm hoping I didn't bore everybody to tears. So, religion. Where does religion fit in all of this? And I think one of the things that's sort of a TLDR on this one is, where does religion fit on this? I think somewhere people are going to really tag in on those patterns. Right? In my defense, I was left unsupervised. This is totally true. I'm like sitting here going, well, sorry, Brad. In my defense, I was left unsupervised. So, I think what we'll end up with, to bring all of this back around to what my buddy Alex and I were talking about this morning on our walk, I think what you'll end up with is you'll end up with people who will see agreed. He keeps me on target. He rolls me in. And actually, honestly, I turned in a project yesterday. I'm still doing projects in between here. So we're still moving forward. I did get one of the panels done for Ron Fortier and turned that in. There are still 5 to go, but we are 5 in. So at least we're halfway through. And I mean, it was Thanksgiving was complicated. There was a lot of things going on. There were people. I worked 5 days in a row with kids in the classroom, and it was, I love it. I love the work. I love the job, but it is tiring to be with that many people and have to pull them through. And it's emotionally a little rough because we end up with like I had one kid that didn't pass, and she was pretty torn up by it, and it was rough. Yeah, I think when I pass and leave this world, I think I'm going to end up with a Cimmerillion-sized tome of world building. I teach. You didn't know this. I'm a driving instructor. I teach the 30-hour driving class, and so I get them for 4 days. I get 14-year-olds for 4 days, intense 4 8-hour days, and I've discovered that my teaching style is stand up and pace. So my 50-year-old body was not taking kindly to that, and I found out that that's because my joints are inflamed. Because as you know, Dan, because you have lived with me, I have psoriasis, but apparently psoriasis attacks joints, and we'll get into the joints. And when it does, as you get older, you get effectively arthritis. And so they put me on medication, and I am so much better now. Like, I feel so much better. Yep. They are 14 and what is it? They have to be 14 and 6 months. 14 and 11 months. 14 and 11 months, right? Because it takes 1 month for you to go through all the paperwork. Then you're 15. At that point in time, you can take the driving. You have to spend 1 year driving with your parents or whatever, and then you are 16, and then on your 16th birthday you can then get your license. So I am always with 14-year-olds most of the time, but they are 14 and 11 months. They're 14, but they're almost 15. So, yeah, it's autoimmune disorders. On the flip side, and this is tinfoil hat, guys, I'm putting my tinfoil hat on. I've no in this entire time, I haven't gotten COVID, knock on wood, that I'm aware of. I might have gotten a mild case. I might have gotten a a non-expressive case that that does not one of the whatever that the word is. I can't think of the word because I'm aphasia, but I haven't caught COVID that I'm aware of. I am vaccinated. I am also I boosted and all of the things because I believe firmly that that's a good thing to do. But I've been in a couple of situations where people around me caught COVID and I didn't. I believe that I may have caught COVID, but my immune system, because I've got psoriasis, my immune system, for those of you who are not aware of what psoriasis is where your immune system is so aggressive, it actually starts to attack your skin and ultimately starts to attack your joints. So I get these patches that you can kind of see here and inside my ears and my scalp, definitely, which are red and scaly and things like that because my immune system has decided to attack my skin. Um, and because of that, I think I have caught COVID a number of times and my immune system just kicked the piss out of it every time. That's a tinfoil hat theory. I've got nothing to back it up except that I have been extremely lucky and never caught COVID that I'm aware of. And when we talk about like Can, my partner who's usually on the show with me, Can has caught it 3 times. The first time put him in the hospital, and he was about 2 hours away from being intubated. So he was, he's, and he's a cancer survivor. So it's been rough. Even the 2 other times that he caught it, 2 other times, 1 other time, 2 other times, he caught it a couple of times. I'm not sure which. One of them, he just sent me a text of him in the hospital with tubes everywhere. And he goes, "Hey, I just beat COVID." I was like, "Oh my God." I didn't know because, sometimes he's not on the show. Like right now, he's not on the show. I wouldn't know. Right. So I usually find out. Um, well, I think some people just are immune. I think that there's something in our systems that fights COVID off. And some people are horribly susceptible to it. Can is definitely one of them. He caught it; it nearly killed him. And he caught it before the vaccines came out. Now he's vaccinated, and since he's been vaccinated, the second bout was only miserable as opposed to fatal or virtually fatal. And on the same token, I've got a number of people in my family who caught it and died. They decided that the vaccine was evil and bad, and they caught it and died. And so, because my family is deep south, and deep south is traditionally anti-government, and they went the route of believing that the vaccine was evil in some way. I don't know. My dad managed to get the vaccine, but that's only because the VA offered it. And actually, the VA told him he had no choice and sort of appealed to his US Army belief systems of follow the instructions of your superior officer. Because I'm not 100% sure my dad would have gotten the vaccine otherwise. My stepmom, however, very much got the vaccine because she's got cerebral palsy and she's susceptible and she's in her 60s, and it's definitely her late 60s, and she definitely needed it. Oh no, and that's part of the problem that we've got is that the vaccine doesn't prevent it; it just makes it a cold instead of kill you. Um, it should be. Yeah, I think most military people are kind of like, well, I got stuck for malaria and I got stuck with, you know what I mean? Like you guys, you guys are pin cushions for the military anyway. Both of you guys are military, so like you both are just pin cushions. They're gonna stick you with everything. Which is why I get like, I'm not sure how military people are the ones that are pitching a fit. I'm like, you guys get like vaccinations for, I don't even know. Yeah, typhoid. I can imagine. Ugh. I had to get the vaccine for, um, I had to get like 4 or 5 vaccines to go overseas to teach in Japan. I can't remember which ones they were, but one of them, whew, it made my skin turn red and it itched and it was horrible. It was like, "Ugh." And I don't remember which one it was. One of them really just didn't didn't settle well. But Japan wouldn't even let me in unless I had them. So, it's a thing. Japan won't let you in right now unless you are absolutely clear of COVID. And they still won't let you in. And COVID's been milder in Japan. I mean, it hasn't been completely, you know, settled, but it's been milder anyway. I can't believe nurses. That's fair. They probably just sat there and said things like, we're not going to put you in those zones where you could be hit by an anthrax thing, because people will think anthrax and you've got the vaccine, even though it didn't protect you against the weaponized version of anthrax. But anyway, you guys have always been the literal first line. I mean, smallpox vaccine was tested on Washington soldiers in the Continental Army. So you guys are always the front line. I'm not, and I mean that in a very straightforward way. It's because you guys are already following orders. It's easy to test on you guys. So, and I'm not saying that to further the belief that, um, that the military is, trying to hurt their people. I don't think the military wants to hurt anybody. It's just that they know they can make you unhappy for 8 months or whatever, and you'll survive it. And so long as it's not fatal, you guys will go through with it because they already make you miserable in boot camp. So, making you guys miserable for a testing of this particular thing or that particular thing, if in the long run it saves your life for something else that they can't anticipate, I think that that's a structure that exists. Yeah. Right. I mean, you were in a tin can. There was, at the time, that wasn't a real threat for you. If they managed to get anthrax somehow into your sub, you got bigger problems. It's kind of like when I tell my kids about rear view mirrors. You don't need to look at your car in your rear view mirror, because if you don't have a car, you've got bigger problems. So you don't need to look at the car to check to make sure your car is still there. So don't adjust your mirrors to look at the car. Well, that's what I mean. A, they take care of you if something goes wrong, as we both know, because you and I both know somebody who's in that situation where we believe something went down and the military is doing their duty. And that's a sad situation, but yeah, if a vaccine goes wrong for us, for me, I end up spending the rest of my life paying every last dollar I have, going bankrupt, ending up on the streets, and then dying. There's no safety net. So you're right. I mean, on the flip side, you are the best. Not only are you the best possible people to test this on, but you're also in top physical shape, which means that you have the best chance of surviving something weird like that. So, it's one of those things. I'm not in the best possible shape. I'm certainly not. And I was never in the military. So even though I'm very aligned to military, as you guys both know, I'm very fond of the military, and I love my soldiers and the people who have worked in the military, and I love the aircraft that we get out of the military and things like that. The truth of the matter is, I've never been, and I'm not in any condition to handle it. And so, yeah, you don't want to test it on me. You'll test it on you guys. Um, I mean, even you, Bob, who you've been out for a while, you're still going to be in better shape even now than me because you were in shape once. The shape I have chosen all of my life is a pear, and I've been in that shape. Oh man, I got my wife the other day on that one. That was very funny because she was like, we're working on our fitness plan, and I said I already have a fitness plan, and she's like, what? I said, yeah, I'm trying to fitness chair. That's my plan. And she was like, okay. And I actually got her to laugh on that one because she wasn't ready for it. It wasn't the left turn she expected. That's okay. Fitness chair. I'm fitting in his chair. I'm fitness t-shirt. Ah. Anyway, yes, vaccines all have the same concept, which is teach your body what the disease is. I have never understood quite why our bodies don't. I guess because, well, no, actually, of all people, I should know this. Why is it that our body does not just attack everything? Because my body is attacking me, right? Yeah, my southern came out on that one. My southern came out way hard on that one. She wasn't ready for that one. Um, Aw, took you to the wrong video. Hi, Jerry. You're here literally for like the last 3 minutes. I'll hold a little longer because I've got lunch ready for me downstairs, but it's all right. It's all right. For you, I'll hang out because, So, yeah. And Bob, you can't, that's the same thing. Some people think that psoriasis is coming from the chemicals in the atmosphere because more and more people are getting psoriasis as time goes on. Some people think that, like the pollution, like we're having a reaction to pollution. Um, and I don't know. I can see how they would think that. When I go to Los Angeles, my psoriasis definitely flares. But that also could be stress for not being in my hometown. You know what I mean? Who knows? Because psoriasis is also triggered by stress, so flares come with stress. Who knows? So I don't know. Maybe not. And maybe that's the compromise. They, we're. I'm not even sure that reusable plastics aren't doing something to us. This is oil. I mean, this is oil that we have compressed. But I mean, it's carbon. It's just carbon, and we're carbon. So, maybe it's not so bad. However, Aw, thank you. Good morning, Forrest. Good morning, Jerry. Everybody's showing up at the last minute. Um, Maybe. There are a lot of electric fields right here. I mean, just looking at my workspace, I've got a lot of electric fields going on. Who knows? Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Who knows? I mean, the truth of the matter, though, is my dad was uh, a technology nut. He loved all technology. He was into technology, and he was surrounded by all of the things that theoretically completely kill us and stuff like that, as far as some of those people say. And he died of smoking, which we know kills you. You know what I mean? Like, that wasn't even really. a question. So it's all right, Forrest. You know me. I'm going to be here tomorrow. I'll be here the next day. It doesn't stop. I've got work to do, even though today I just didn't. But that's okay. Sometimes you just don't. Sometimes you don't do work. And who knows? I'll get off stream, go downstairs, get something to eat, come back up here. I might go, I'll finish this or I'll finish that. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, who knows what's going on? It's funny. I think about all this all the time. One of the things that struck me is one of the nah, you were fine. I appreciate that, Forrest. Aw. I really do. You're awesome too. Actually, all of you guys are awesome. Yeah, probably. I think that was the entire point of the cyberpunk. One of the things they were talking about in cyberpunk, the cyberpunk anime that I just watched on Netflix, which was kick ass. But what I was kind of trying to say was that I think about this a lot. There's a video going around of people who were talking about what they did during the Bikini Island atoll testing, where they put a whole bunch of sailors. Um, the anime is called it's on Netflix, and it's Cyberpunk Edge Runner, EDGERUNNER. Cyberpunk Edge Runner. Super graphic, super gory. So if you've got sensitive people in your family, it is pretty brutal. But it's a good solid series. And it's a one shot. Not a one shot. It's a one shot of 15 episodes. So there will be no season 2. It is what it is. It's classic anime. Yeah, you'll have to watch that alone. I do too. I had to watch it. Usually what I do is I just put it up on this monitor and draw. So John Wick brutal. Yeah, story wraps up. Akira brutal. Akira brutal, Fist of the North Star, that kind of stuff. Lots of people getting half their head blown away and arms blown off and stuff like that. Maybe even Battle Angel level if you're talking about the manga, which I absolutely adore the manga. And I liked the movie just fine. It was good. It was a solid movie. And the anime was pretty rough. The OAVs, they were pretty, Animatrix. That kind of level. Oh, wait a minute. I don't know about Animatrix, I can't remember it now. Gosh. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. I actually found that out, Dan, watching Dirty Pair. I love Dirty Pair. And I'm having a hard time watching it now. Can you draw karate? Hi, Aquamarine Dragon. I can draw karate. Certainly. But karate's a big topic. Do you mean draw like a martial arts pose? I could do that. I certainly could. Yeah, Dan, moving on. We're culture changes. Culture changes and moves on. I also think that there's a lot of aspects of our culture that we weren't aware of, where people really were suffering and were under kind of the boot heel of society. And we've identified it and we're moving on. And always sunny in Philadelphia. But I feel like we've moved on and we're getting better about things and we're leveling things out. And once we are aware of it, we look back on some of the stuff and we're like, damn, I didn't realize that was just out in the open. I didn't realize it. We're even seeing it now with frontline things. You look at Star Trek, the original series, And even in original series mode, it's rough. They tried and they were pushing hard for the 60s, and that was a serious press. But now you look at it and you're like, ugh. And even Next Gen, right off the bat, we had an episode of Next Gen, which is cringe. It's just so cringe. Code of Honor is a cringe-worthy episode. It's hard to watch because they were trying so hard to get into... You're funny, Jerry. Code of Honor is a great example of it. They pushed so hard in one direction, they ended up accidentally going the other direction, and it's cringeworthy, and the actors hate it. And I mean, and you know, that's fair. I think the best part is the way that they have owned that. Watching Strange New Worlds, the way that Rebecca Romaine has decided to own that by putting her in a dress. She puts number one in a dress, but the dress is a dress. It's not for showing the butt of Rebecca Romaine. It's a dress, but it's still a short dress. You know what I mean? Like, ownership. Skirt length was stupid. For a military vessel, that was dumb. However, it's even funnier to think that for a long time, women in the military were also wearing skirts on duty. You know, and you're like, okay, but, you know, yep. Oh, yeah. Number one is the best. She's kicking butt. But I mean, Rebecca Romaine has, you know, she pushed real hard to not be in a standard uniform and to get that one piece skirt in there. Oh no, we're losing a stream. Here we go, guys. It's about to, one of the streams has gotten wonky out there. I apologize if we're losing me there. But yeah, that's the thing. Anyway, she pushed hard for that and ended up with weird things. I just effectively went away with that, and everybody's in the same uniform. Yep. Oh yeah. Well, and that's what I mean. Roddenberry was a feminist in the way that you would see feminism from the view of 1960s. He was a feminist. But the world of feminism was very different in the 1960s. And so the aspects of it changed. Yeah. Well, it's because he was also, I don't want to say sexist, because that's not exactly the right word. He was in a zone where, in his world, he was in a zone where he was pushing for feminine equality, but also pushing feminine sexuality. And that made for a unique combination, which does make it difficult to understand misogyny. And I actually understand Roddenberry's vision in that instance to a degree, to a long degree. Like I have oft said, in Bellatrix Rising, there will be nudity because these guys don't care. You know, it's 500 years from now, they're over body shame. However, I'm not just going to make my pretty girls naked. They're all going to get naked. Everybody gets naked. The whole crew will get naked. It's fine. And that's part of that whole world. It's in his world, Roddenberry's world. If Star Trek didn't have censors, yeah, like Starship Troopers, that's one of my favorite scenes in Starship Troopers. And every time I talk about it, everybody's like, yeah, I know why. And I'm like, no, you don't. That's not why I like that scene. I like that scene because I feel like in the future, that's really what will happen. Everybody will just get into the shower. They'll start talking about their work they did today. They clean off. They do all the things they're doing, and there isn't an ounce of sexuality about it. We just do that. And I think also when you get into a place where you're mixed with people who are not humans, like these guys are, I mean, they're going to get in the shower, and in the shower will be, effectively Dorito chips with legs, which is what the Shakrana look like, right? Yeah, I think religion and Bellatrix Rising won't focus on sins. Um, but I think it's also funny, by the way, for those of you who are wondering, I think it's very funny that I have to set up a structure on here to block out my screen when I'm working on those scenes, which I do just so you guys can see what it looks like because it's funny. Um, I have a this, which puts up my artwork on a rotating slideshow on top of what I'm doing here. And you can still see my mouse is here, but every time I'm on the actual drawing surface, you can't see what's on the drawing surface. That cracks me up. And I do it specifically so that I can work on those scenes where people are naked or whatever. Thanks. Those aren't space stations. That was the ring ship Enterprise on there because I did that in watercolor. That's what my character would look like as Harlock. I think that's funny. I always get a kick out of that. It's a good picture. That's the ring ship Enterprise. So the Declaration class. There we go. Thank you. Yeah, that's Declaration class Enterprise. XCV030. So, or XCV330. So, for some reason, oh, wait. Or, ha 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 ha. That was funny. Okay, that made my entire week right there. stupid, like funny. Anyway. Laggy chat window reflections. Oh yeah, all because I put the chat window up on that. It's because usually when I'm by myself like this and I don't have Can with me, I actually can put up the chat on here as well and continue to operate with the yeah. Yeah, exactly. I could put up the chat window because I actually have it fed to my my OBS. So I use OBS, which is open source broadcasting system, so that I can switch between panels and different monitors and do different things and stuff like that. So anyway, yeah, so that's kind of, I don't know, I had an interesting time today, guys. I really appreciate you guys being in here to chat with me. It was fun. Maybe I didn't get any work done, and that's okay. It's totally cool. Yeah, to do all the things. And that's fine. It is okay that I didn't get any work done. I actually did get work done, if you think about it, because we all pondered religions. And I think I have codified a religion set up in my head for my Deus Thati. I think we're already there. I think it's our own natural tendency to question whether we're doing the right thing or not that pulls us back. I think we get a little too much into our navel gazing, and that sort of pushes us in the wrong direction. But I think we can easily say that we are capable of being spacefaring people. and we'll make it. We'll make it through. We'll make it through this time. We'll make it through all the other times. We'll make it. It'll be fine. We won't kill ourselves. I'm pretty sure of that. I think we're going to have rough times if we're not careful, but I think we're doing fine. So I'm also building Bellatrix Rising in the same concept picture of Star Trek, where this is a future where we survived and we made it. We're on the other side. We're going to have conflict. There's going to be problems here. The Commonwealth has a different mentality, and but they're not bad people. They just have a different mentality. So they want a different. They have a different goal. So even my bad guys in this story are not really bad guys. They just have a different goal. That doesn't mean that we don't have conflict. It doesn't mean we don't have a problem, but they just have different goals. So anyway, that is the nature of today's show. I'm actually getting hungry. I don't know about you guys, but it's lunchtime here. It's coming up on lunchtime anyway. So I'll see you later, Dan. And I will feel free to join me at any time. Incoming call from Maya. And that's my wife. So I will talk to you guys later. Thank you for joining me, everybody. And as always, keep your eyes on the stars. Bye-bye.